There has been an emergent discussion here in our culture today as regards the effect of propaganda, uh, mainly from the media apparatus, but also from government officials. And, I think that the general take has been that this is America and these things don't happen here. Such was Andre Shulginson's assessment that there is this fallacious idea that such things are impossible here. These things could not happen here. They happen elsewhere in the world. They've happened elsewhere in history, but they don't happen here. Andre then, of course, goes on to fill us in that he says that all of the evils of the 20th century are possible everywhere on earth. All of the evils of the 20th century are possible everywhere on earth. And that includes the propaganda of despotic states, single party authoritarian states that have, under weather of effort and time and purpose, have solidified their position in governing a people. Despots are not born overnight. Oftentimes despots will climb the mountain of state government, right? They will climb the mountain of state government and ford its summit in stages, right? They will move up the mountain face in stages before they secure that position at the top. And the dialogue here, the discussion here in the United States is that, propaganda is kind of a conspiracy theory. People just have not come to appreciate, I think, that a propaganda also comes at us in stages, and we are slowly groomed by it, given over to it, and we don't question. People don't question. But the discussion as regards the effect of this propaganda in the culture today is been, I think, more and more people have realized that it's less and less a matter of conspiracy and more a matter of actuality. The Time magazine piece about the cabal of actors that influencers, people of power, elitists that sought to influence the outcome of the 2020 U.S. elections. That's to put it mildly. One of the tools, right, in their toolkit is to shape and to form public opinion, to shape and to form, to influence the views of the citizenry, right? To influence the views of the people. Because, man, it's the hearts and the minds of the people is really where the issue is at hand, right? It is a struggle for our hearts. It is a struggle for our minds. And so they no doubt realize this. Despots no doubt realize this. Information is power. How true it was when Alex Jones named his program InfoWars. How true it was. It's like everybody's on this timeline where they're just sort of realizing, dude, Alex Jones was right about that. It's so funny when you come across that. Or when you realize that yourself, you're like, damn, that was right, wasn't it? That was true. I'll tell you what, one of the narratives that's been perplexing us as of late has been regarding the January 6th rally in D.C. that devolved into what has been called a siege of the Capitol building. And at this quote-unquote siege, people died. And that's part of what has been used to give weight and credence to the idea that this was indeed a siege. This was indeed, this this went beyond the effect of a protest. This went beyond the effect of disenfranchised and people that feel that had a complaint, a genuine complaint. That this went beyond that, and with the breaking of windows and the overwhelming of certain perimeters, doors being opened, people gaining access to the building, it was called a siege. But part of that, like I said, part of that was measured in the effect that people had died at this event. People had died at this event. Now, I think it was 5 people that they're saying that had died. Now, some of those people were officers. Some of those people were participants in the devolved rally, right? So apparently, other than Ashley Babbitt, who was shot at point blank range, climbing through the window of a broken door, or the broken window of a door, beyond, outside of her, it seemed that all of the other deaths were medical emergencies, which in and of itself is kind of strange. It's kind of strange that at an event there's so many medical emergencies, so many people dying of heart attacks and whatnot. There was a couple of police officers that later in the day, there was a police officer, as I understand, that later in the day had a heart attack. He gets listed as the deaths at the Capitol, right? He gets put on that list, even though he died later in the day from pre-existing condition, right? And there was another officer that passed away later in the day, that evening or the following morning, for reasons that were not given. But he is somehow put on this list of people that died that day. There was another officer named Sicknick, Brian Sicknick. And the story was that he had been beaten over the head with a fire extinguisher and then later that day died of his injuries. Well, there's a video out of this event, and somebody indeed does throw a fire extinguisher in the direction of police, which is freaking illegal. That's an assault and battery charge. Assault and battery on police officer. All of these officers had, riot gear helmets on, and this fire extinguisher bounces off the helmet of one of the officers and falls onto the ground. So I think this is the incident that they're referring to. I think the New York Times runs this and says this is where this officer was beaten over the head by a fire extinguisher that was thrown through the air, bounces off this officer's helmet. This officer apparently later in the day died. Well, the family has come out. There was an article last week where the family of Brian Sicknick came out and said, no, indeed he did not die from being beat over the head with a fire extinguisher. And they're asking that his death not be politicized. Of course, the media won't roll with this. The media won't talk about this because it doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to present. That this was this grave and out of sort siege, rebel rousing that rises to the level of terrorism. In order to make that claim, in order to make that assessment, people, it adds merit to this assessment if there is blood on the ground. The fact is, Brian Sicknick did not die from being beaten over the head with a fire extinguisher. He probably didn't even notice it because the helmets that those cops wear are pro, right? There's no joke, man. These are the freaking helmets that the cops wear in dealing with crowds. He's fine, man. That was not the issue. But the family has come out and said as much. The family said that's not what he died of. And apparently the autopsy information hasn't been made public yet, so it's not been clearly stated, but they're saying that he died of a health condition. He died of a health condition. It sounds to me like when you sift through the propaganda, when you sift through the disingenuous bias of the media that seeks to project a narrative that is not even reflective of what is actually going on, right? What actually happened that day. The media can't be bothered to tell us what actually happened, to report on what actually happened. But when you sift through it, you find that the only blood on the ground that day was the blood of Ashley Babbitt, as I stated, who was trying to gain access to a hallway, right? And moments later, police come up the stairs behind her. So really, there was no danger at all. The officer that shot her, the security that shot her, jumped the gun, if you will, right? Got a little head over his skis. You know, here's a question that I would have as regard to Ashley Babbitt's death. You know, in the video, there's a couple of videos out of what happened from different angles. You see the officer standing there, literally feet away from this access point that Ashley's crawling through. At no point do you hear the officer yell, "I have a gun, I will shoot." You don't hear any of that. You just see him in the frame pointing a gun. You see him in the frame. You got to wonder, could he not have taken this woman to the ground and cuffed her? Could he not have pepperballed her? Could he not have tased her? I mean, was the situation really so out of control? And, you know, the justification, I think, time and again, is that the officer felt that their lives were in danger. Was their life really in danger by this unarmed woman climbing through this window? I've heard a lot of people on the left say that she deserved it, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Strange how hard the hearts are of people when the narrative doesn't align with their politics. I find it bizarre and strange, the lack of sympathy for this woman that I have heard overwhelmingly. You know, I find it interesting how hardened people's hearts are by the narratives that have been fed them by this establishment cabal that clearly seek to divide us and to set us against one another. I tell you what, Ashley Babbitt's blood on the ground that day on the Capitol building was the effect of unaccountable government power. Government power that finds no need to answer for her death. Notice that there is no answer given. Notice that the Capitol security has offered no answer as to the reason, as to the necessity, justification for the officer's use of deadly force in that circumstance. And no one else is talking about it either. The press isn't talking about it. Fox News isn't talking about it. You know, it's a sad state of affairs that we find ourselves in. And no doubt, knowledge is power. It is time, man, to take the knowledge of what is and put it upon a lampstand for all to see. God bless.